Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here, and I'm back with a new commentary on the live-action adaptation of Fist of the North Star, starring the B-movie action legend Gary Daniels. Joining us for this podcast is Rob Hill, the author of the book The Bad Movie Bible, and also runs the YouTube channel with the same name. How are you doing, Rob?
Hello, and thanks for having me.
It's great to have you taking part. Just recently I shared some of Rob's work on my YouTube community tab. His videos are very funny and well put together, so there is a link below to his channel so you can check out his work. So folks, this film is actually on YouTube. A bunch of people have uploaded it, so you can watch along as we ramble on about this pretty rubbish movie that does have some fun parts to it. So let's crack on and play the movie. So Rob, did you see this film back when it came out on VHS, or did you, like me, see it when it hit DVD back in, say, what was it, 2004?
I did see it back in the day, yeah. It was one of the last films I think I remember renting from my childhood, like seminal video shop, which I can still picture the wall of martial arts movies now, a sea of Don the Dragon Wilson and Gary Daniels and co, and I wasn't impressed, if I'm honest.
Because I knew about Gary Daniels through City Hunter. That was, I think, to most people who are sort of into martial arts films, found him through that with the sort of the spoof on Street Fighter 2 in it, and then obviously this came about, and I must have saw bits of it when it was before it came out on DVD, because I presume it must have been on like the Sci-Fi channel if you had cable or satellite TV, or perhaps like the Bravo channel, which would show all sorts of kind of like schlock in the evening, often like the Punisher. They always show the Dolph Lundgren Punisher endless amounts of times, along with like the Toxic Crusader, and I'm sure Fist of the North Star would have been in that sort of line-up TV schedule. But I remember the funny thing about this film was that because I saw the anime as, you know, as along with that sort of craze of people getting into Akira, Ninja Scroll and things like that, and the anime is quite colourful. And then when you see the live action film, it sort of reverts to being this kind of grey, dark looking movie, which is kind of a bit of a step away from how the anime looked. But it seems that the director, Tony Randall, who we know sort of directed Hellraiser 2, seemed more interested in making a horror film than an action movie, I think.
Yeah, and members of the cast and crew have talked about this, haven't they? I know Gary Daniels has done a number of interviews pointing out that Randall had no idea about action. He'd never made an action film, he'd never shot an action scene, his history was in horror. And Daniels felt, yeah, he wanted to make a horror, but then he decided he wanted to make a romance instead. So all the attention apparently went on that love triangle dynamic, and the action just got forgotten.
Yeah, and when you do see the action, it's very much like it's all pretty much covered in close-ups and kind of mid-shots, and Gary Daniels is like very frustrated with how there were a promised amount of times to shoot scenes and then given like literally an afternoon to film a sequence, and you've got like we choreographed to beat up like 6 or 12 guys, we've only got 2, you know what I mean? So it's just like the crazy action you saw in the anime is just being reduced down to this kind of a few punch-ups, which by the end you kind of see they're giving Gary a bit more flexibility now to, I think he edits one of the scenes, which actually is probably the best scene in the movie, and the rest of it's very sort of cut quick and, you know, in typical kind of style of Tony Randall. You know? Exactly,
yeah. Typical of not an action movie, basically.
Basically, yeah.
It's a common story, this as well, and Gary Daniels and Richard Norton both tell exactly the same story, having worked in Hong Kong, and both in City Hunter actually. They come to America, they make action movies which cost a small fortune, they can have a mainstream audience, but they devote an afternoon to a fight scene, and that was the biggest surprise to both of them adapting to Hollywood after Hong Kong. It's just how little time and effort goes into the fight scenes.
Yeah. I mean, I think to give this movie sort of credit in areas where sort of with the production, I don't necessarily think it looks super cheap. I think money has been spent on sort of the production design and the miniatures, because we're how it sort of, you know, how it starts with this showing this a post-apocalyptic kind of world. It sort of sets the tone quite well, and I think it starts out well. Then it sort of, once the story somewhat unfolds, it sort of loses itself, and it sort of becomes a little bit of a bore fest where they've because I presume down to sort of Tony Randall saying, "Oh, we've got to cut some of these fight scenes. They're not interesting. I'm not interested in that." And the love angle story element isn't really strong enough to hold the film.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. That is exactly it, isn't it? I don't think it's a bad looking film on the whole. I don't think the cinematography is awful. As you say, it's grey, and that doesn't help with our engagement when so much time is spent on close-ups like this of Gary Daniels' hugely expressive face, and that drama stuff and that romance stuff, the love triangle thing, which this gets bogged down in, and it just doesn't really work.
This is apparently like when they finished the film, the film wasn't long enough, so they shot this sequence where he's walking through the desert, as it were, sort of pad it out. It's like, well, doing a commentary when Gary Daniels talks about, oh, this was cut. So, well, they've cut it back so much, it's too short to go like cobble on this kind of intro sequence, you know. And weird, why is Malcolm McDowell in this film? Who thought that was a good idea, you know?
Why is most of the casting in this film is fairly inexplicable at the end of the day. They keep the names Ken Shiro and Shin, and obviously these are in the manga. Well, manga artwork is a bit sort of non-committal sometimes, isn't it? Shin has blonde hair, I think, in the original, but I mean they're obviously meant to be Japanese characters, and it's a degree of whitewashing that would be quite controversial if they were to make this film again with Western actors, isn't it?
And, you know, the amount of complaints Ghost in the Shell got, you know, when that was adapted. And it's weirdly, because like, the producers, the Japanese producers, was like, oh, we think it's great casting, but everyone out in the West was like, oh my God, it's really bad.
This is it, yeah. The Japanese producers know full well that they've got a more marketable movie on their hands with a Western star in it, particularly a famous one. So they're not going to. They're the last people who are going to be going, oh no, we need it to be.
Well, Kinshiro is supposed to be. It's Mad Max meets Bruce Lee.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
full body outfits and stuff. And it's like, well, as we're seeing with the color palette, and obviously some of the miniatures we see now, which are actually, I think, kind of do a quite good job of sort of expanding this world.
They do.
Despite it being quite, like, you can clearly tell they've got like a very small soundstage for most of it when he's walking through the desert, and there's like this. You can tell they've got such a limited space. And they could have easily just dropped in a matte painting to show the world with him walking or something like that. But when you sort of see like Mad Max 3, and at the end where you see the cities covered in sand and stuff in the desert, that's what this film should have looked like. But it looks like a kind of, you know, sort of side companion to sort of the world of Hellraiser or something, you know, where it's all gone a bit topsy-turvy.
Yeah, and it's also very it isn't very cinematic to my mind as well. I mean, we've got some fairly nice shots here, but there are so few wide shots of a character in a landscape, say, or it's all, watching it again recently, it's all just fairly choppy, fairly close-ups. It's a bit like television, I suppose.
You end up with a film that feels very boxed in. It feels there's no real scope to it at all, and that's the frustrating element. I think it's common. I think even with Hellraiser 2, Tony's style of direction is he uses a lot of close-ups for stuff, and you can tell they're probably maybe an artistic choice to sort of hide the limitations of the sets because they're quite small.
Yeah,
they've got apparently 2 sound stages they used, and they used like a downtown hotel in LA for like where Shin lives, basically.
Okay.
Which is quite cool, which is quite nicely set dressed. It kind of fits within the Fist of the North Star kind of world. But I mean, with all movies that are the VHS, I mean, you'd know about this, Rob, like to make a cheap action sci-fi movie, shoot it like Mad Max. There's so many knockoffs of Mad Max.
Yeah.
You know, just need rubble, and a building that's half destroyed, and there's some leathery outfits, and you've got a Mad Max ripoff, and it's like done for peanuts. You know,
all you need is an old car and a quarry, and you're away.
Exactly, and probably Albert Pyun as director.
Yes, absolutely.
So many films of his like shot this kind of quarry or something, or like this abandoned like steel mill or something like that, like in Nemesis, or what's that other one where that guy's like really small, shrunken down with a gun?
Doll Man.
Dull Man, yeah,
Yeah.
that was a dull movie. That was fucking hell. Yeah, it's not great. We've got the kid here from Hook, which is I can't remember his name now. What was his name again?
I don't know. Do you know what? I've never seen Hook. I didn't realise he'd been in anything else.
You know, he'd been in anything. No, he's in a bunch of films. Dante Basco, that was it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this film's got Clint Howard in it as well. Which is quite. You know, he's in everything.
It's there's a bunch of people in this who are kind of not famous for having more famous siblings, but have better known relatives, because Costas Mandylor is Shin, isn't he?
Yeah,
who's Louis Mandylor's brother, I believe. The actor who's also in a bunch of. He's in the Debt Collector movies with Scott Adkins. And he's really good. He's dead good in them. And then you've got Clint Howard, of course. Here he is, looking like Clint Howard. And then just completely randomly, Melvin Van Peebles is in this.
It's mental, isn't it? You know,
one of the great angry men of the original blaxploitation, and
he doesn't get much to do in this, does he? Apart from looking a bit depressed.
Nothing.
You know?
He mutters about slavery a couple of times. They obviously thought, right, it'll have value. It'll be extra value if we can have Melvin Van Peebles talking about slavery.
We got some like the sort of supporting cast, like the bad guys. You got the guy who's in like Bloodsport, plays like the Muay Thai kind of guy. And you've got like one of the other guys. He's like his head explodes. He's on like The Mask and a bunch of other films. You know,
Chris Penn as well. Speaking of exploding heads, another brother of.
Well, he was like apparently good friends with Donald Dragon Wilson. I think he was in that. He was in Future Kick, wasn't he, Chris Penn? I think. Was
he? I can't remember now. That's a terrible movie.
It's a stupid name as well. Me and my friend were just trying to think of alternate names for it, like Past Punch or something like that, you know. And
then the cover is the poster for it is a Terminator. It's the same poster as the Terminator, but the movie's got nothing to do with it. No robots.
Everything had to have like I mean, as you with your Terminator knockoff video, there's so many sort of just blatant. This knockoffs of the Terminator. It was done so poorly as well, but you know they do provide some good laughs though. So
they do, and there aren't as many Terminator knockoffs as there are Mad Max knockoffs, of which this effectively is one, really.
Yeah.
As you were saying, the aesthetic is just so easy to recreate and so cheap to recreate. It's no wonder there are so many of these movies.
That's a good miniature shot as well.
Yeah, I love that shot.
That's really good. These sort of things adds scale to it, because you just need it moments where you can kind of see more of the landscape. And this needed a few more matte paintings to sort of give it a bit of scope. Like in the film like Cyborg, where they're going off to find like the cure or whatever, and at the end, the final act, you see them all walking down this bridge to the city. It's just a quick matte painting, but it sells the idea that. It's a massive land, and it opens with a great matte painting. It's trying to destroyed bridge. You think, wow, that gives it some scale. But there's none of that really. I think there's maybe one matte painting where they're kind of looking up, and you kind of see these buildings in this film. But most of it's kind of they use miniatures to sort of give it, show the city and stuff.
I wonder how much of that was the Japanese producers, because I know it's a US production, isn't it? But I, from reading the interviews, I think the Japanese producers held sway somewhat. And
joint venture, wasn't it? I think with the Overseas Films Group. I think it was because like I know when Gary Daniels came on board, he'd signed a deal with Overseas Film Group to do a 3-picture deal, and it was like he wanted to do this film called Union Jack. Which I presume he was kind of play on Captain America, because he's obsessed with comic book heroes, and Captain America was his favourite superhero. So I presume that was kind of what he wanted to do. And then they asked him, we got this idea to do Fist of North Star, and I think Tony Randall had already been involved when Gary Daniels jumped on board. But I mean, as we see, little flashbacks we saw there, it was like this is what Tony Randall's all about, isn't it? Is the blood and gore.
Yeah, look at them. There's shots like this as well.
Yeah. Did you ever see his film Ticks?
Yes. Yeah.
I thought that was surprising alright, actually.
I don't remember it all that well, to be honest. I was thinking about rewatching it before today, but didn't get the chance. But I do remember enjoying it. Yeah,
it was alright. It's a bit of a change of pace for Tony Randall. It's all set during the day, pretty much. It's not like this kind of dark kind of movie. It's a bit more humour to it as well. There's a 4K release. I watched it in 4K. Like Vinegar Syndrome put it out. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. And the same guy scored this, Christopher Stone, did the music as well. Because I remember picking up the soundtrack to this film, and it had ticks as well.
Yes, there's a I've seen that. Yeah, there's a joint soundtrack, isn't it? And the music's good, I think, in this.
I think it's really good. I think it kind of, it's probably one of the best parts of the film. I think actually, it creates this sort of big heroic theme, doesn't it? Quite epic. Despite you can tell it's quite a small orchestra and a bit of synth thrown in.
Yeah.
Is it so stupid with his jaw?
Oh god.
That's so like a comic book, isn't it? That's... Fucking hell.
He's got his special Kenshiro expression that Gary Daniels does throughout this movie. I've never seen him do it in other performances.
I always thought he looks like Trey Parker, so we sort of see Trey Parker in like leather gear and a black hair, just be like, it's Gary Daniels.
This, I remember laughing hysterically at this when I first saw it. Whoever came up with the idea that his death moves should be completely uncinematic and completely unviolent and completely unvisual is just ridiculous.
Now, if he didn't have the line, "We trying to do tickle me to death," and it was just played so straight, it would just be one of the most dumbest sort of moments in an action movie, wouldn't it? So they cut away here. They must have cut that, like for violence. His head goes and explodes.
You can hear it go, can't you?
Yeah, I think you hear it pop. Yeah. So we're now into sort of downtown LA in a hotel, which is kind of. At first, I thought it was just Matthias Hughes. At first, that would have been quite a good little moment for him, but apparently this guy's a bit of a joker on set. Spent a lot of his time just putting on like fake wigs and like googly eye glasses and stuff, and apparently not a martial artist, but it's obviously built like one.
Yeah, I think that would have driven me mad if I was on set with him.
Will you pack it in? You're driving me nuts. I love this how he tempts him with like, "Oh, we've got jam, we've got peanut butter," or something.
He could have made more out of that.
I know. He should have had some like a 6-pack of Snickers. Oh my god. Oh, it's fun size. I might have a nap.
That kickboxer spoof in Hot Shots Hot Shots 2 with the bowls of sweets. I've always liked the idea of just slipping a close-up of that into an actual cut of Kickboxer and then watching it with people who don't know.
That'd be good.
I'm no longer a threat to you. I do not practice.
He's properly creepy, isn't he, Costas Mandylor in this? He
yeah. I think he does an okay job
him.
with it, doesn't he? It's his costume design's a bit out there. I think it's all just like baggy. I think it's just kind of the 90s thing, I suppose.
Yeah, shirtless leather. That was a big 90s thing. Leather tunics and leather waistcoats and leather jacket, but with nothing underneath. In fact, I think there's quite a bit of that in this movie.
Apparently, yeah, because this guy's not a martial artist, and Gary Daniels said, you can kind of tell, but he doesn't look. He does a few sort of high-flying kicks in a minute and sort of pulls them off okay. But I think when it comes down to, obviously Shin's going to do his sort of super move, which makes people glow like they've had ready break.
Yeah,
and then like your elbows explode or something like that. Elbow death,
exploding elbow move.
Yeah.
I suppose in a way they're kind of shooting this a lot like, or a bit like they shoot a lot of these modern John Wick type movies with the close-ups and the fast cutting, because they're frequently using people who aren't necessarily fighters, and
yeah.
Hollywood's figured out a way of getting around that now. You can really cast pretty much anyone as.
Oh yeah, because I think it was back when they did like Dragging the Bruce Lee Story, because Jason Scott Lee wasn't a martial artist but he was an actor, so they go, well, it's better now to train actors to fight.
Yeah.
And then, so you don't have to worry about, can this martial artist act? Oh, God, we've got to put him through acting school and all this crap. When I saw like John Wick 3, I mean, by the end, you sort of... Keanu is showing his age. He's quite slow with all the... Like, you see the long shots, the long takes. It's just like slowly punching people. But it still looks good, though. I mean, he's doing all the choreography really well. But it's not
convincing. Have you seen Nobody?
No, I've not seen that yet. Is
That's
it highly recommended?
I really like it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Very John Wick, very much that kind of thing, that kind of action.
Yeah.
But just taking I can't remember his name now. Taking Better Call Saul and making him into an absolute badass is, I mean, that's quite an achievement. It's completely convincing.
He had like a heart attack, didn't he? Like not long after the film came out. I remember something like that. The main star of it. Yeah, it was a bit of touch and go, I think, for some people. I love all the sort of the curtains in front of the lens. Actually, it's not too bad. It's a bit like a music video, isn't it?
It's a Merchant Ivory production all of a sudden. Is this going to be Emma Thompson?
yeah. It's going to turn up in a minute.
Weirdly, in the original manga, or the anime anyway, and the animated movie, this character is a white-skinned redhead girl, so heavily pointing to her being Western. So they've actually switched the roles back, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's always a bit with these adaptations. There's always they're always going to, as you say earlier on, they're always going to play to what's going to bring in the money, isn't it? Really, I mean, I think having her as a Japanese actress kind of play the part was kind of like honouring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at least they can say they're not completely ignoring the heritage of the whole franchise.
Exactly. There's a great on YouTube. There's a great sort of spoof, or not a spoof really, but it's kind of a redub of Fist of the North Star called Dub of the North Star. And the guys just dub it over, and it's so fucking funny. It's like the Kenshira's just looking for a sandwich or something like that. And they play on that idea that he's just starving for the entire thing. So you don't see him eat anything. He just walks for miles and miles, and then the kid who follows him just like falls asleep in the sand. Someone's just dipped over some sand over the top of him, like he's been there for ages, you know.
Some of those redubbed movies are getting really good nowadays. I think they come along quite regularly now. It seems, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Some of the best ones on YouTube is that the Star Wars bit at the end where they get their medals. They're just taking out all the music. Yeah. It's just that people going coughing and things like that. And Chewbacca just goes ah and screams in the background. It's so good, really clever. It's that look Gary Daniels gives is always slightly amusing. You know, when he sort of stares at people, he doesn't really have an sort of intimidating look to him.
No,
really. The spot him built. He's built like a brick shit house. You know, he can kick your ass easily, but you think, nah, he won't beat me up.
It's because he looks like a Jedi.
He does. I love the bit. It should be coming up soon. The training sequence where he does the splits and then, like, weirdly just crushes a rock. You know, so fucking weird.
Why not? Have you seen many Gary Daniels movies? Or is it,
I've seen. Is there one where he's like a teacher or something?
Oh yeah, it's one of his bigger ones. Is it Rage?
You think something like that? Yeah, that was actually quite good.
Yeah,
I often, because the plots are so shit half the time, I just like watching the segments where like there's a montage of his fight scenes, and because he's so good, you know, even at he's in his late 50s now and he's still really good.
Yeah.
Like he's in like Tekken movie. Maybe that's not a very good film either. And I was so annoyed. Like in the Expendables, he was like cut out a lot of his stuff.
I heard about that. I gathered that he was meant to have a bigger role, and he should have been one of the original crew in a way, really. Yeah,
definitely. Because they brought in other people. I'm like, who is this guy? Just like some NFL dude or something with I think it was. I didn't know who he. Yeah, I didn't know. He wasn't a B movie actor. He wasn't like someone I knew from that period. The Expendables films, you know, I thought were a bit of a huge letdown. The first one in particular, I thought it completely failed on what it was trying to do. Like the third one, weirdly, I thought was the best one.
I quite enjoy all of them, to be honest, because they're just so stupid. And it's that wheelhouse, isn't it? It's Sylvester Stallone being a stupid one-dimensional hero.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what movies were for the first 10 years of my movie life. That's all they were. Yeah, it was. I think it is Rage he was in. But the one I didn't remember seeing until I looked recently, the Gary Daniels movie, is Blood Moon. And that is I think he's a cop, or he's the hero anyway. And he's called in because there's a serial killer on the loose, but he's only killing the world's greatest martial arts stars. And because Gary Daniels is an expert in serial killers and martial arts stars, he's the only one who can catch him. And that's a premise and a half.
That is great, man. Someone must have been smoking a massive joint and go, okay, we've got a great idea for a movie. Go with it, you know.
And this kid's an expert because...
I don't know. I think it's that kind of like, they must have watched like Army of Darkness when Bruce Campbell's trying to train people at the end. You know, oh, let's copy that, you know. Well, she's supposed to be blind, isn't she? So she's kind of... Did he like return her sight?
No,
maybe?
yeah, he's Neil Breened her already. I think actually he gave her.
That's good.
He used because his martial art is all about pressure points, isn't it? And secret pressure. So he did the secret strike that makes your opponent be able to see again, and now she's fine.
She's still miserable. For fuck's sake.
Well, I suppose if you're blind your whole life and you get your sight back and this is what you've got to look at.
That's true.
There's a story behind Melvin Van Peebles being in this. There has to be. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
It must have been like one of those things where someone's a friend of a friend or producer and they had like this kind of road, like, you want to come and shoot for a couple of days? Yeah, come in. Because if you've got like George Chen pops up, like support, you know, he's in a bunch of movies, like he's in like Lethal Weapon and like Rush Hour, things like that. Oh, this is great. This is where Gary Daniels shows off his acting talent here. When Malcolm McDowell sort of appears as this kind of zombie out of the ground, doesn't he?
That's why they cast Malcolm McDowell.
You want that as some sort of alarm, don't you? To wake you up in the morning. It's like, I always thought, like, if you can't get Terence Stamp, you go for Malcolm McDowell.
Yes.
You know? Who's the next sort of British sort of legend from the 60s and 70s? Oh, let's have him.
Yeah. They're still alive. They weren't big drinkers, so they're still with us.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, Malcolm McDowell's probably got, like, maybe the biggest sort of repertoire of shit movies he's been in. It must be. I mean, Christopher Lee, I mean, he was in a lot of rubbish, wasn't he, as well? Like, during that period where his career sort of went downhill. Like,
but Malcolm McDowell and, people like Malcolm McDowell, and Donald Pleasence is another one. If you look at their filmography, you'll probably find there are 200-odd movies in there. It's ridiculous. They just made trash week in, week out because they got paid for it. Oh dear.
I don't think this is in the anime, is it? I don't recall seeing this. This is like, there must be like, Peter Atkins has just gone like, we've got to have some sort of more horror stuff and just have this kind of excuse to have
they changed quite a bit around, and also the anime changed quite a bit around because it was produced by Toei, wasn't it? Who did the series, which is 100 something episodes, and when they made the anime, they wanted to try and cover different ground, I believe, when they made the movie.
Right.
So they kind of did a bit of a pick and mix.
I sort of condensed it down, basically.
Yeah. And then this obviously takes a different approach again. So neither of the official movies is, apparently anyway, a particularly accurate version of the original story. Believe it or not, the unofficial South Korean movie Legend of Fist of the North Star is actually apparently much more faithful to the original text.
Yeah, because you sent me a bit of that a while back, and I was like, well, it actually looks like the anime with the outfits and the sort of the locations they've used, but, you know, I don't know, story-wise it might be a load of old bollocks, but...
Well, there's no English language translation or subtitles, so what the story is, I have no idea. But it looks a lot like this. It was made before this, and it does look quite a lot like it. It's, you know, it's got this great. There's a lot of stuff in scrapyards, like which I don't think is in the original anime I don't remember there being any cars or anything like that ever shown in it.
Yeah, the anime they do drive around cars.
Oh,
and
do
stuff.
they?
They do use them. Yeah, like Mad Max, pretty much. That's very much Mad Max element. We see like Kenshiro, using a motorbike later on.
Okay.
But he only drives like 4 foot or something like that up a hill because it stops. Because you see it, you don't see him use it earlier on, but it's behind him in one scene. I think, oh, okay, where did he get that bike from? It's like, must have cut it out. I was like, oh yeah, because it's also like, if he doesn't follow his destiny, his wounds bleed from his because he's like weird condoms he's got stuck on him.
Bleeds from the Durex. Do you know if they actually are? I think maybe it was an IMDb trivia thing saying that they are actually condoms glued to his chest, and I thought that sounds like bullshit to me. That sounds like
they called in Condom Man on set, because the wounds looked like condoms.
But not because they were condoms. Yeah. It seems a bit silly.
Oh, this is great. It's a bit. He's gonna grab the boulder, give it a good squeeze. Fucking rock. Take that. I think that him doing these kind of like stretches and stuff is very much what Van Damme was doing, wasn't it? Like
completely.
Sure, because at the end he's doing these kind of helicopter style kicks like Van Damme, and doing it just as well.
He kind of changed everything, I think, Van Damme, didn't he, in terms of American martial arts movies?
Oh yeah. And that was always kind of frustrating watching some of Van Damme's movies because I loved them, and then but because you start watching like sort of Hong Kong martial arts, you kind of want something a bit more elaborate than just watching him kick someone or punch them in the face, like repeatedly, like in Universal Soldier, which is a great film. I love it. But he just grabs like Dolph Lundgren and just continuously punches him for ages in that barn. I'm like, come on, do something else, Van Damme. Do a kick.
And I remember thinking Bloodsport just had the best fight scenes I'd ever. At that age, I'd probably seen Bruce Lee. I'd probably seen Enter the Dragon, but that was about. I think this is the best fighting I've ever seen in an American movie. And then you discover Hong Kong proper, and it's just. I mean, I think Bloodsport's a nearly perfect film. I absolutely adore it. But the fight scenes are so slow and it's simple, boring.
Well, I think Van Damme's probably his best in that, really, because he had to show off, didn't he, to show that he could do all this kind of cool stuff.
Yeah,
he has a lot right on his shoulders, so he's a bit more kind of show offy in that film. Actually, in Hard Target, he's pretty good as well. Like some good kicks in that.
Yeah.
But I didn't really see him evolve that much. As a martial artist, it's always very much you pay for what you get.
That's a good point. Yeah. Like Seagal, he kind of went backwards, I suppose, if anything.
It's got slower and slower.
Do you ever watch modern Seagal movies?
I've seen people like sort of reacting to them or sort of talking about them, because it's like, there's things where there's a double for him walking away, there's a double for this and that, and like the aspect ratio would change to make him look thinner. It's glorious, man. It's like you can't. No one's gonna fall for that. You think what? Why is he all stretched?
They are incredible things, those movies. In every one of them, he's wearing a huge oversized coat as well, because that obviously makes him look slimmer. It's the strangest logic.
What's it Ricky Gervais said? I think it's wearing a black t-shirt to make you look thinner. It hides the belly. Maybe that's his logic. Yeah,
if he wears a black t-shirt underneath a foot thick woolen coat, it's not going to make him look slimmer. Gary Daniels, I read an interview with him the other day saying, talking about his time on Submerged, that Seagal movie, and how what a nightmare it is working with someone like Seagal, because they just don't want you to have your moment. Their final fight apparently was a huge, elaborate thing that had been worked out, choreographed and so on, and they went in there, and on the day of the fight, Seagal just said, no, I'm doing this, re-choreographed it in 5 minutes, and the whole thing was just reduced to a couple of blows, and no one touching Seagal, obviously.
God, that's annoying. Because Gary Daniels brought on his Sifu on this, his master, and sort of choreographed the fight scenes, and they'd like crazy elaborate stuff they'd worked out, and things would just get kind of cut short. And the end fight scene, we beats up all the guys, and it's supposed to be taking place on on these stairs, these steps up to where Shin is, and they'd something. Obviously, fighting on steps is actually quite difficult, I think, to choreograph out. But they managed to do it. But they sort of decided it's going to be in the entrance of this building, and just one camera, just kind of shooting from one angle, just punching in for close-ups. You know.
See, I wonder why. I wonder what. I mean, is it all just time related and money related, or? I wonder why you just throw the fight scenes out.
Yeah, I think combination of two. I think, Rob. But also, I don't know. Tony Randall hasn't really talked much about this film. And I think there's a couple of podcasts where people have interviewed him, but they're all obsessed with Hellraiser 2. I'm like, come on, guys. He's done that to death. Talk about Fist and North Star, man. Talk about the shit. You know, that's what you want to know about. Because when they always do these kind of extras on DVDs or whatever, like documentaries, and they go, oh, we're going to do one on this big movie. And you think, well, I know everything about that film. Let's talk about the sequels, which are just worse. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, they're sort of good sequel, but they always have problematic productions. And I remember when the Alien quadrilogy set came out, me and my friends, we all agreed. We all went straight ahead and watched the making of Alien 3. That was like...
Yeah, that's the one you want to watch anyway, isn't it, though, the making of?
yeah, and just David Fincher just losing his mind on set, just going, fuck you to the camera, you know. Which is great, because, you know, everyone knows about Alien 1. You want to know about the drama. It's a bit of a harsh shot. I think it's all second unit, this stuff is. Director had sort of shot these sequences, so it's a little bit more. There's a lot of whip pans going on.
Yeah, there's some movement, isn't there? There's a bit of dynamism.
Yeah,
I did find one interview with Tony Randall, when he said when they first were handed the screenplay for this, or the concept, he read the screenplay, he watched the series and the anime, and couldn't find a story anywhere in any of it.
What?
He said his job was basically making a story out of this. Well, he and his co-writer, whose name I forget now. That's it. Yeah. Their job was to make a story happen.
But it's strange that he'd say that, considering that Fist of the North Star is so popular still. You know, still making video games of it. So there's a story there. They just didn't really.
Exactly. There. Of course, there's a story there. It's just, he just, I think, wasn't interested in it. No,
it's definitely the wrong guy for the source material. It should have been a full-on action movie, martial arts thing, like from the get-go. That would be like This is something like Craig Baxley should be doing. You know what I mean? He did like, you know, Stone Cold and Dark Angel. That's what you want doing this sort of movie.
Yeah.
And you know, just something crazy and over the top. You want it to be wacky and weird and a bit in places. You know. It should have been a Hong Kong production, perhaps. You know,
that would have been very interesting. I suppose they wanted to keep the appeal as broad as possible for an American market, but that would have been given. I mean, Riccio is, to my mind, is kind of the movie this should have been, and Asia is the place to make that movie, I think.
Definitely, exactly. I watched that Ricky film not long ago, and it was like, it was so over the top of the city. But I kept thinking to myself, this is so Fist of the North Star.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
He smashes that wall. It's fucking cool. But at the end, it's like it's got when that guy, the main guy of the prison, falls in that thing, it comes out this big monster. I was like, oh my god! It's like Jerry's uncle from Seinfeld. It's like he turned into that, you know. Hello, Jerry.
It's almost bad taste, early Peter Jackson territory when it comes to gore and.
Oh, definitely. All it needed was like a fighting sort of martial arts sort of vicar, you know, kick ass for the Lord, you know.
That's The Divine Enforcer.
That's right, yeah.
There's a fantastic movie called The Divine Enforcer that our mutual friend Tai Singh put me onto, actually, about a kickboxing priest.
I've got to see that.
It's got Jan Michael Vincent in it, and he is more drunk in that movie than I think I've ever seen an actor be on camera before. It's absurd. There are obviously scenes where he's meant to be standing up because everyone around him's standing up, but he has to sit in a chair in the middle because he blatantly can't stand. Every scene he has, almost, he's reading a newspaper because his lines are obviously written on the inside of the newspaper.
Oh, this is lazy as Brando. It was like cue cards everywhere, you know.
Yeah. I think Brando had a bit of an argument behind the ability to do that, though. Whereas
he did. He's
if
quite
you're
good
Jan
at it,
Michael Vincent, you're
Yeah. Well, apparently, because with this film, it was supposed to be picked up by Orion Pictures, but Orion Pictures wouldn't offer them enough money. They wanted more for distribution to sell it to them for the rights, and that didn't work out and went straight to video. So Gary Daniels, he had the premiere in Japan. They apparently had their premieres in the morning, like a Saturday morning, and the feedback was very good. And I think that was the only country it was shown like theatrically, and went straight to video. So even though it's weird that the producers thought that okay, they're not going to offer us enough money for the US rights, we're just going to release it on video. So they knew they'd probably still make a lot of money anyway, selling it on video.
And HBO as well. I think it premiered on one of the first movies to premiere on HBO. I remember reading somewhere at some point.
Wouldn't surprise me. We were talking before we started recording. It's like the poster for this film is so rubbish. Like it's just this grey. The American one's awful. It's this grey background with just like Gary Daniels posing with like the bad guys just cropped in on the left and right. And then the UK one, the DVD is kind of a bit better, but it just kind of doesn't really sell the Fist of the North Star sort of imagery to try and make it fit the anime. Where if you, for anyone watching or listening to this, if you find the Japanese Laserdisc, the cover for that is superb. It's just like it's bang on like the anime. But also in Japan, for the Laserdisc, it comes with 2 audio tracks. One is this obviously English track, but the other one it's dubbed over by the talent who did the dub in Japan for the anime. So that's it's all keeping in sort of trying to be faithful to the cartoon.
And that seems to be the only aspect to this movie that fans have been supportive of and got on board with is that there are. I was reading somewhere an American fan prefers to watch it with the Japanese voiceover. Really? Japanese dub and subtitles, even though it's very confusing. But I can kind of see the logic there.
Yeah,
because this is a really distinct franchise. It's got a very particular image and so on, and none of it really is translated into this movie.
No,
so it's clearly made for a mainstream audience, I guess, which is why the artwork has nothing to do with the original. I can't remember the name of the guy who did the. It was written by Burenson, wasn't it?
Yes. There's 2 guys. Who created Fist of the North Star?
Tetsuo
no Ken. Yeah. Weirdly, look at that. The guillotine seems the cleanest item they have on that set. It seems brand new. I didn't even see them sort of deliver it on those vehicles. Where did they get this guillotine from? It's weird. But it's kind of, the film is, I would say, kind of ripe for a remake. I'm surprised they've not tried to do it again. I know Gary Daniels had said that a bunch of sequels were kind of developed, like scripts were produced, but nothing came of it. I was easy to stand to the fact that this also didn't make enough money to warrant a sequel, or just maybe it made money, but it kind of was critically panned. So, well, we're not going to do any more.
I don't get why it hasn't been remade as well, because it is a huge franchise, and unusually for a franchise of its size, this is the only official live-action movie, and no one really cares about it or remembers it. And I said, speaking of the size of it, I read this is the 30th most valuable media franchise in the world, Fist of the North Star, and that's in terms of how much revenue it's generated. Either side of it in the rankings are Frozen and SpongeBob SquarePants.
Christ!
And it's produced $15 billion it's generated $15 billion in income.
God!
And the number 1 is Pokemon, and you've got stuff like Star Wars and Mickey Mouse in the top
Batman
5 as well.
Something like that.
Yeah. But I mean,
I suppose this kind of appeals to internationally because you've got a character, obviously in the comics and stuff, like a Bruce Lee character who's in this Mad Max world, which is always kind of appealing anyway to Western audiences. So you can always see the attraction, even though the story. I've played 2 of the games on the Xbox 360, and the story is always kind of a bit meandering and a bit baffling, but it was fun anyway, beating up like 100 dudes at once, watch them all explode.
The story is it isn't Shakespearean, is it? It's it's thin, but the thing that always confused me about all of the renditions of it that I've seen is that Kenshiro is trying to get his long lost love back, Yuria or Julia or different names for different versions, who's been kidnapped by Shin, who is master of the Southern Cross town community. He's a huge figure. But in all of the versions, Kenshiro's kind of wandering about in the wasteland looking for him. And it's like, well, this is the guy who runs your world. Everyone knows where he is. Why aren't you doing anything about it?
I think it's wandering around looking for a sandwich, maybe. I don't know. That's his destiny, isn't it? It's a sort of... I think it's like... Because we saw him bleeding earlier. I think maybe because his destiny is to defeat Shin, but he keeps veering off to try and find Julia, but even though they are together, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting confused.
They are together. But I mean, there's the suggestion that he's kind of a superhero figure, so he's doing worthy things. But they kind of lose that in this live-action version. He isn't particularly heroic.
He seems reluctant to do it.
Yeah,
like he's sort of, okay, well, we'll go back and help them out. Then got to go do this thing, and then
that's not a guy whose role in life is helping people. That's a guy who's looking for someone. But
yeah.
Or something. Maybe it is that sandwich.
Okay. Now it's flashback. We're going to see the full graphic bit, isn't it? Right, coming up, we get the
stab, the
his fingers in his chest, the finger wounds. Yeah. I think there was a discussion about how much English she knew. I think she knew English quite well when she came on set, because often they often have to sort of train them speak English when they got when the Japanese or Chinese sort of finances say, oh, you've got to have this person in, and they've got to sort of speak English. She spoke English very well, and it sort of made it easier for Gary. But I think they both had acting classes as well before filming to sort of boost his abilities, because Gary hadn't been the lead, had he? So this was his.
No,
I think it's his. Well, it wasn't not his own. He's been other leads, but this was his first one. And
this was his first big goodie role, wasn't it? I think he was kind of a bit pigeonholed as villains before this.
Yeah, that's right. I've not seen the Albert Pyun movie Knights. Have you seen that?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that any good?
Funny enough, it's got cyborgs in a desert.
Oh my god! Wait a minute, have you already covered that on that Terminator rip-off thing?
I don't think it's in there. No.
Okay.
I think there might be a shot from it, just a random shot, but
because he was like he was on that, and then he was like, oh, I've got this job to be in City Hunter with Jackie Chan, but I've got like 10 days to film with this, and Albert Pyun's like, you've got to go do it. So you adjusted the schedule, and you went off and made City Hunter.
Cool.
Albert Pyun said you couldn't turn that offer down.
Albert Pyun's always seemed like a sound guy.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you managed to get hold of the Blu-ray of Cyborg recently, the 88 Films one, his whole interview for Electric Boogaloo is on there.
Oh.
So it's like an hour long. They'd interviewed him for, I think maybe a bit longer. He talks all about the history of Canon films, and it's in fine detail. Because what you see in the documentary is kind of like snippets of him to fill in the story, but the whole thing's on there. It's one of the best extras I've sort of had them. Sort of best extras I've seen them do on these releases. Because he did. So he got from Albert Pyun his extended cut of Captain America. And all it was like the standard DVD. And he's inserted 35mm transfer of deleted scenes where Captain America goes and gets a job, right? And he works in like this, I don't know, it was an old people's home or some sort of thing. He's cleaning up or something. It's like, why is this in this? Why is this in the film? Well, this is not really any, I thought it'd be more action, but no, it was just really boring scenes he put back in. But he signed the DVD or whatever, which is nice. But he came with a commentary as on a separate file. It wasn't really synced to the DVD because obviously he didn't know how to do it maybe. But he has a massive long discussion about Spider-Man on the disc. So I'll have to find that for you and send it over to you.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I'd love to have seen Albert Pyun's Spider-Man as well.
Oh, I think most people would. Yeah, it would have been like so bad, but like they you know behind it they're trying to make a good film. You know what I mean. It's not one of those. It's not like one of those modern movies now which are designed to be bad. It would have been just kind of like funny, but you know what they're trying to do. But it would have been interesting. You know. Oh, you go. Oh, you do the flying kicks. Here you go. Yeah, a bit of lightning. This should have been far more epic, this sequence here. Oh, he's getting a few punches in.
I suppose this is another potential problem for Western audiences. There are a few very Japanese narrative devices and character elements and so on in this, and the fact that Kenshiro spends most of his time losing in the fights that he has is unusual, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing literally starts with him being beaten in a fight by the villain.
Yeah, for sure.
And he doesn't then go and get a montage to make himself better. He just gets another chance and does better.
Just do better, you know. Well, he has a little bit of a montage, doesn't he? But I think I don't know what the context of that training is when he crushes the rock.
That's true. Yeah. You get the feeling that's just what he does anyway, though, don't you? That's just how he spends his days.
Yeah. Because in the anime, like he'd do like a move and it'll cut down like half a building. That's how powerful he was. It's nuts. Yeah. As you saw that on screen, you'd be like,
well, cool. Gary Daniels talks about this, because he was a huge fan in advance of the manga and the anime, and he was saying, like, imagine if Shin had just thrown a mountain on Kenshiro in the middle of a fight or something.
Yes. That'd be cool. That'd be cool,
great.
Man. I bet you just couldn't do it back then, could you? Like, especially with the budget.
All the South Koreans managed.
Oh, well, yeah.
It doesn't look entirely convincing, if I'm honest, but they did give it a go.
It's a bit like watching RoboCop 3, where RoboCop spends half his time lying on the floor, or just like he's useless RoboCop, isn't he? Just on his arse the entire film.
That's a trope I love in bad movies, when they just forget to have the main character do anything.
He's the hero. What's he doing? You know.
There's a brilliant Die Hard knockoff. I can't remember what it's called now. But Ice-T plays the John McClane character, and he gets on the actually it's more of executive decision knockoff.
Yes,
but
yes.
He gets aboard the plane, gets shot, gets injured while getting on the plane, and the entire movie is just him lying on the floor bleeding. He doesn't do anything. He literally does nothing. The air steward does all the work.
Oh my god! It's like if they made a Batman movie and he spent all his time in bed.
Yeah,
you'd be like, what is going on here?
Or just tinkering in his workshop in silence. 2.5 hours of that.
Yeah. And the film just focuses on Robin or something, and the film's called Batman. You're like, what? It's kind of funny, interesting, like listening to what Gary Daniels said about the production was like the scene later on where she's Chris Penn is sort of torturing her, and then his head goes and pops. Right, that's like one of the first scenes I shot in the film, and like the first scene we see in the movie when Gary Daniels walking through the desert. It's like they shot like after the film had wrapped. Completely. It's a mad puzzle, isn't it? They've put together. And that's a nightmare for continuity as well. Like Gary Daniels' first scene was fighting Shin.
Yeah.
At the end, because it's just like whoa.
Yeah.
Trying to make things match. For later on.
To be fair, I am hopeless at noticing things like that. I never seem to pick up on those little, structural errors that come about from those moments.
It's like a scar or something. It's quite obvious. You can probably go, oh, that's a bit weird. Why is that there, not later on? But yeah, often the case, I'm none the wiser. Unless I'm told. I'm like, oh, right.
That's some good makeup.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's like Jason Statham.
That's the guy from Bloodsport. Yeah, the Muay Thai guy.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he breaks the guy's leg. Goes,
Is it Paco? I think he's called Paco.
Yes, it. Yeah.
He's in AWOL as well, or Lionheart, I think it's known.
Yeah,
outside the UK.
is he one of the guys who's sort of following Van Damme?
Yeah, a French legionnaire who's
That's
trying to track him down.
Yeah. I think I believe Chris Penn sort of became interested in martial arts because he was in Best of the Best.
Yeah.
I think that sort of spurred it on, you know. And he's in tons of sort of B-movie schlock. And I always kind of perceived Chris Penn as sort of a sort of big star, you know, because his brother was obviously, you know, hugely famous. But Chris Penn had been in a lot of big movies, and he was still kind of in big movies in between these schlocky ones.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm really confused by what he's doing in this movie, because it seems like, because it's not that big a role. I mean, it's prominent, but he's probably the best known, well, certainly the best known actor at the time in this movie, and he's a henchman.
Yeah, I suppose maybe he's sort of the opportunity to be in a sort of martial arts movie, and may have been a fan of the anime.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Because this is after Reservoir Dogs, isn't it?
Yes, this is 95. So Reservoir Dogs is 92, isn't it? I can't remember. It's definitely because Pulp Fiction's 94.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. So he's a relatively big.
And he was in Rush Hour like 3 years later, you know, but also playing another sort of supporting role, you know.
Yeah, I was always amused by Chris Penn in Best of the Best, because I think nowadays you probably there isn't quite such a physical archetype for action stars, but back then there really was, and the idea that this slightly overweight and clearly not particularly in shape guy can be one of the world's leading karate practitioners seemed a bit odd.
He's Best of the Best, Rob.
Of course.
I remember seeing, I swear it was a cover for Best of the Best 2. And there's the 4 guys in the film with their chests out, just posing like this. And I thought, is this some sort of gay soft-core porn, you know? It seems a bit overdone it with the, topless men.
Tony Randall here, the director of this, has got a bit of a history in that department, hasn't he? He used to... I was looking at his previous filmography, and he's done something for some series of things for Playboy. And obviously cut his teeth, along with the screenwriter and the cinematographer, and I think a bunch of them, at New World for Roger Corman in the early 80s.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was also basically just a porn outfit. Really.
Well, it's like the cameraman on like Christopher Nolan's guy he worked with for years. He started out in the Red Shoe Diaries.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. You know, everyone's, like John Hamm was like a set dresser for pornos. I think he was.
Really?
Like, yeah.
It's
mental, isn't
it's
it?
a strange job when you think about it.
I know. There's sort of things on their list to fill, their IMDb. Like, don't put that on. Because Richard Donner for years didn't. He's always said his first big movie was The Omen, but he'd done a bunch of movies before that, which was shit, you know. So some of the stuff he shot in the UK, he just didn't really mention them, you know. It was just like, no, it's The Omen.
Yeah.
My first film.
Stanley Kubrick wouldn't admit to making Fear and Desire in interviews. He'd
Really?
the same thing. Yeah, no, my first film was Killer's Kiss.
Oh no, he's dead. Oh, that's a good line. I like that. As Gary Daniels was saying, it's like when they have wrestlers in these action movies, it's not to be rude to them, but they're often a lot slower, because they're too big, So he has to slow down his fight scene as well. So it thus becomes not particularly exciting to watch.
Yeah.
Unless you sort of drop the frame rate down to maybe 23, 22 frames per second.
Or just cut it right. You can do anything with editing. And unfortunately, usually it's just used to ruin fight scenes in America, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's always just cut too fast, and it's all close-ups. You can't tell what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a big issue. Like the mid 2000s, they just went crazy with that.
Yeah, and the shaky cam.
Yeah, thinking it was kind of interesting, and I remember Scott Adkins being really annoyed and frustrated with that approach. And I think if you can do it right, like Paul Greengrass, to a certain degree, like the Bourne sequels, even though they were a bit of a stretch, because if you remember people sitting, when I was projectionist, people sitting at the front, kind of close to the screen, watching these fight scenes, they've got motion sickness. It's just, too much shaky cam. So that's good stuff. Like shooting down, shooting from above and shooting down. That's good stuff.
And I know it's not something they do in Hong Kong either, but I've never understood what the harm in having, if you've got two people fighting, you don't need flashy camera work or flashy editing. The flashiness is in the fighting. Just lock it off. Stand it there with them both in frame. One shot, one take, just so we can see everything. And it's so much more impressive that way, because you can see
definitely
how skilled they actually are.
And it shows that audiences do love that, because when a sort of resurgence of the action films with John Wick, for example, where they'll show you, boom, locked off camera, everything's all happening in frame. People go, wow, that is fucking cool.
Exactly. You never hear people saying, oh, I wish there was more shaky cam and faster editing in that action scene.
Never. That's always the complaint, isn't it? People they do enough bloody screen tests and get people's feedback. Surely someone goes, there's too much shaky cam.
Yeah. Do we need 8 cuts to have Liam Neeson get out of a car? Is that necessary? Apparently.
So talking about Liam Neeson, like the first Taken, I thought was a brilliant movie. The sequel was so bad. I didn't watch the third one because the style of filmmaking was shocking with the editing, and just they dumbed it down for it to be a 12. I was like, no, what are you doing? It's like the beauty of this 18 rated kind of Liam Neeson movie. Was it an 18? I'm sure it was an 18, the first one.
In this country, it probably was, yeah.
It was, yeah. But they just ruined it.
I know. I liked one of the sequels. I forget which one it is now. I watched it. I used to work in post-production, and I remember we had a quiet afternoon, and the people I was working with, we all decided to watch this new Taken thing, and we were all in absolute hysterics at a scene in which he's on the phone to his daughter, but doesn't know where she is. So he's roaming around, and she's throwing hand grenades up in the air so that he can hear them explode and know it, like a flare gun. He's running. It was just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, you used to work for, is it City Site?
Technicolor and Moving Picture Company as well before that. Yeah, in post. Yeah, I left 6 years ago.
6 years ago. How many years were you with them?
15 years.
15 years.
15 years, yeah.
And were you telling me, because I was doing the Tomb Raider review, like, oh yeah, I remember checking the rushes on that, weren't you?
Yeah. Every now and again, in a movie like Tomb Raider, I'll be sitting there quite happily, and then it'll get to a shot I worked on that I watched 1,000 times, and that I hated with every fibre of my being, and my world just wants to end.
What was the sort of outside of Tomb Raider? What were the ones that you kind of really quite happy with in terms of what you'd done?
Oh you never. This is where I learnt that most movies are shit. That that we get to see, even critics don't see everything, and you really do realise that 9 out of 10 movies that get made are just going to be forgotten about. In fact, I noticed one of these guys. I was looking who was in this, and one of these guys is in a movie called LD50.
Never heard of it.
Lethal. It's a British horror movie from about 2003, starring Mel B from the Spice Girls. And I hadn't thought about that. And I spent 6 months working on that movie, and it hasn't crossed my mind since. But there it is, sitting there. It still exists.
Fucking hell. Oh, you go. He's using his motorbike for 2 seconds. That's a cool shot.
That's 2 good shots, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. That's a thumbnail that should be used. Easy peasy.
I bet you that's a frame in the manga.
Oh, definitely, yeah. That's a good shot. There's some interesting kind of I was saying what you said earlier about the photography. It is pretty good in places. It doesn't fall into the trappings of being like just they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
they've clearly got people that know what they're doing and just come to sort of deal with a script that isn't particularly interesting and trying to sort of spice it up with these kind of intercuts and extra sort of inserts to sort of make it,
I think what you were saying
visually
earlier is
interesting.
very true, very right. Actually, they haven't got a lot of leeway, have they? They can't have a lot of big shots, panning shots, wide shots, because they just didn't have the money for the set and so on. But then things keep happening that are nice to look at.
They could have just gone out into it's shooting in LA in California. Just go out to the desert and just shoot tons of it out in the desert.
Yeah,
that's essentially what Fist of the North Star is. It's mad. Because this is the first part of the movie they shot. Yeah.
that's nice for the actress for her first day to be Chris Penn trying to rape her.
They got to start using a bit more sort of Dutch angles going on with some of these scenes. I think, but usually by the end, this sort of director gets fed up.
Yes.
just knock off the camera, just get it done. Not trying to be creative anymore. Rats! Eat some rats. Must be starving.
I like Gary Daniels, but he is awful, isn't he? He's such a bad actor.
It's that's what they wanted. Sorry, these sort of shots where you got the extension of the city and he walks down it. But I'm always a sucker for a Gary Daniels sort of performance. To sort of because he's such a good martial artist, but he's never mastered the art of acting, I'm afraid.
Have you ever seen a movie called Dancing? It's On.
No.
It's relatively modern. It got a little bit of profile because it's so awful that a bunch of bad movie YouTube channels picked up on it and featured it.
Oh, really?
But it stars Gary Daniels, and he as a hotel owner. He doesn't do any fighting at all.
What?
It's his role is to worry about his daughter who's like fallen in love with the wrong. The guy works in a kitchen or something. He's too down market for his daughter, so he's like angry, stuck-up hotel owner, stroke father. And what possesses you to cast Gary Daniels in a role that is hard drama and nothing physical, nothing else?
He must have thought, Rob, this script landed on his lap. He goes, "Oh my god, this is the perfect opportunity to be in a drama."
Oh, of course, yeah. I can
I
see
don't
him
have
wanting
to do any martial arts. I've got to do. This is going to be my moment. And it's like Van Damme did something very similar. Well, not like in terms of like running a hotel or whatever. Did you see that film where he's like he can't talk? He's got this kind of bandage around his neck. It's kind of either he's dealing with these kind of Hispanic kind of gangs. It came out a couple of years ago. It's, one of my friends who runs this kind of film festival. They'd shown it, and I heard a sort of kind of press about it. I thought, okay, this kind of sounds interesting. And I watched it. And it was bloody awful. Van Damme again doesn't do any fighting in it, from what I remember. He can't talk properly because of his voice, so he doesn't really have to act. You know what I mean? Just kind of emotes. Van Damme was always quite good at doing that. I thought he's always quite good with acting, just with his eyes.
Yeah, he's not. He's like Stallone in a way. He has a quality and a presence that, used right, can really work.
Yeah, and that's why Gary Daniels kind of doesn't have that.
No, he really doesn't, does he?
Which is a shame because I'm always rooting for him. It's like, come on, Gary, act, god damn it.
He's got something though, because we want to see him in stuff.
Exactly, yeah, because because he fights just as good as everyone. He's better than Van Damme at fighting, better than a lot of the guys.
He's a bit like a proto Scott Adkins in my mind.
Yes, definitely. Where Scott kind of got the acting, skills to a degree where he's a lead in many films. He still gets acting jobs, so
he's good in them as well. As long as he isn't playing a character, he's a bit like Statham or Michael Caine. Let him play himself, and he can do that really well.
This is like the best fight scene in the entire movie now, where I think Gary Daniels got to re-edit it, so it's kind of better than what it would have been. You know, it's still like kind of one camera angle really. He gets the sticks. That's quite cool. Uses that.
As you said, it was choreographed by his Sifu, who has one of the coolest names ever, Winston Omega.
Oh my god,
Winston Omega.
that's like a superhero name, isn't it? Really, it's in like that's from a comic book. So yeah, because he's edited it in a way where you can, you know, he does the impact, then it edits, and not like cut to before, you know, cut to the impact, you know. And I just shoot it in slow mo as well, which is good. See, it's okay. I was saying about screen presence. He's got the presence here, like to hold, you know, when it comes to a fight scene.
Yeah.
He really sells it.
He has a charisma, doesn't he? It's just it's not quite the same as
It comes to talking, you know.
Charisma is not acting.
Yeah. You also got to have a voice, a really kind of like, you know, with these sort of British action stars. They've often got a very sort of, you know, if they're from Essex or Birmingham or whatever, that sort of accent stays with them, and they try to get rid of it, but it's still there. It seems like Scott Adkins, it's still there. You know, when he tries to put on an American accent, like, oh, I can still hear, you know, his English accent. You know.
It's funny they talk a lot about actors talk a lot about the craft of acting and the skill of acting and the talent of acting, but really half of it is just when you open your mouth and say something, how does it come across on screen?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's
if you've got a good rhythm to your voice as well when you say these things.
This is an indefinable collection of qualities that make one person inherently worth listening to and enjoyable to watch and so on, and another person not.
Yeah, it's like Stephen Fry could just read off a shopping list. You know, that's interesting. You know.
Yeah, and some of the greatest stage actors in the world, you could probably put them in a movie with Gary Daniels, and they won't necessarily communicate. It won't necessarily. It's a different quality.
Yeah,
screen acting.
I remember when I was talking to Peter MacDonald, he said on Legionnaire, he surrounded Van Damme with really good actors to help boost Van Damme's performance. So, you know, often the case when they shoot dialogue where, you know, say they're talking to Van Damme, but he's shooting the actor, Van Damme would often piss off, so he doesn't have to be there. But he'd make him stay there so you get the reactions. And the actors will do the same to Van Damme to support him. So that's what you kind of, Van Damme is often, his performances get better when he's got a good director really there to sort of show him the ropes through things, or cushion a blow, as it were, to sort of make sure his performance is kind of consistent. But, you know, when he gets to the B-movie world, they don't have the time, do they? You also don't have the directors who really are good with the actors. They're just there to get the job done.
Exactly.
It's not to say, like, you know, in case of Tony Randall, I don't think he's bad at directing actors. I think he's because I don't remember, you know, Hellraiser 2 thinking, oh, these are bad performances.
No, and that's a popular movie as well, isn't it? I think I like it.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit better than the first one, actually, where people often get confused about the Cenobites are only in it for a short period of time in the first one. But the second one, it's kind of very much amped up their appearances, and it's like, I was terrified by that film as a kid. It was on Channel 4 one night, and saw the Doctor dude turn into that big monster with his kind of weird penis-like thing, and just like, oh my god. And I went to bed, had a few. I'm sure I didn't sleep very well that night.
It was such a powerful image. I remember the image of Pinhead with the posters for it in every video shop you went into for much of the 80s, and just such a great image.
Oh, for sure. Weirdly, on this topic of Hellraiser, the recent trailer came out for the sort of remake of it all. It's actually spent a lot of money on it, and it doesn't look that bad.
So is it a proper reboot then? Because the series has continued, hasn't it? They're making sequels relatively recently, I believe.
they get worse and worse, don't they? They get like another film. We'll just go, we can just put Hellraiser in it. Yeah, just to keep the license, you know. But yeah, it doesn't look too bad, the new one. And people are like, oh, it doesn't look awful. You know.
So it's that difficult thing, though, isn't it, of recasting a horror icon whose face you've actually seen. Is it Doug Bradley? Is that his name?
Yeah, Doug Bradley. Yeah. Who can still really do it, because he's not like, he's just wearing makeup, isn't he? And he's bald anyway.
Yeah.
So
And he's a good actor as well. I think I've
for
seen him
sure.
in a few things, and he's dead good.
Really good. This has a great voice, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing.
No, wait. I almost forgot. I have some sad news. Julia.
I think have we missed now? I can't remember if we missed it where he does his Van Damme sort of spin kick in the air. You know, I think he does it in a minute when he starts to beat him up. The music sort of swells up with the big theme tune.
He's removed his leather vest, so whatever it is he's doing, he's getting ready to... We've only got one leather vest over bare chest now.
He was literally just punching Gary Daniels in the side there. He's like not really supposed to be doing that, but they get a bit carried away. Like people who aren't martial artists, they're sort of, you know, they don't know. The timings are always slightly off.
Gary Daniels had worked in Hong Kong already by this point. He'll be used to taking the odd blow.
Exactly, yeah. I remember there's like Cynthia Rothrock, which she said, like, I think one of those kung fu documentary they did for BBC where like she, you know, work the Chinese and go back to the USA and do the fight scenes, and all the stuntmen would be like going, "Ow, it really hurts," you know. She's like, "Oh, sorry," you know. She's used to Chinese going harder, you know. Oh, he destroyed all the lovely food, the jam and the... Oh, man.
Not the jam.
The Sunny D. Oh, God.
He missed the opportunity for an artsy close-up on the broken jam jar on the floor there.
Oh, man, yeah.
The red blood jam spilling out.
Are we going to do his ready Breck move? Get the glow.
God, you better hope he just stands there waiting for it.
There's only a few opticals in this movie, isn't there? We saw the bolt of lightning when they kick earlier, and oh, we go. Oh, the elbows! Ah. Apparently, he said like it took like 17 hours to apply this. I think that's a bit far fetched, maybe, but.
If they had just one person doing it, maybe.
yeah, and they are a bit slow. Because all it would be, wouldn't it? It would just be like you put the sort of what they call it when the squibs on them, just kind of paint over them, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be like a fake chest prosthetic they put over him, would it? I don't know.
I suppose they've got to run. That's a good point, actually, because they've got to run the pipes up there for the blood itself.
Yeah, maybe so.
I'm always confused when you hear this that it took 7 hours to apply my fake nose, and you think, how on earth can it take 7 hours to do that? And I know it looks great. Don't get me wrong; like they've done a good job, but.
Well, it's like the Fast Show, isn't it? Where he cuts to the guy who goes, "It takes 7 hours in makeup," and he just puts a beard on, just walks off.
I don't remember that.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, he's still glamming. Oh, his power's fading. Oh, shit.
Oh my god.
Here we go, the theme tune's kicking in. Oh, the Van Damme kick.
There we go. I love this. These moments are in most American martial arts movies, aren't they? When the guy just, all of a sudden, the guy just goes, I'm not even going to hold my arms up to defend myself now. I'm just going to walk backwards slowly as I'm pounded.
But it's really one of those sort of like, everyone's like, yeah, he's decking him. But he's not really fighting back. But yeah, here we go. But it's a moment for the hero to show off what he can do.
The drama dictates that I must forget how to fight.
Yeah. Mate, this happens in every Van Damme film, I
Yes.
swear. Yeah. Now, Van Damme's got to do his moves now, isn't he? Oh, yeah, shit. Right, okay, so you stand still for a bit. Those cogs didn't look particularly tough, did they? They looked a bit wobbly.
Just give it a push.
It's like this film's supposed to have like graphic horror to it, like because the Hellraiser element, but you don't really see, it's not really a good shot, really. It's a bit poorly covered, that was, when his head explodes.
I bet that came back and forth between the studio and the MPAA a few times, though.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because Gary said that some of the distributors in other territories were a bit concerned about the gore and stuff. So there may have been extra trims here and there. But I've in the DVD, I don't think it says like uncut, whatever. It does say on the front cover though, first rate, rated by Video World. It's like, who are Video World? Who are these people? It's like reviewed by Shaking Stevens. Lovely stuff. Whack.
These poster quotes, they're getting so creative as well. That
Great, yeah.
People are now using negative poster quotes. I've noticed a couple of times as well.
Oh, they often take an interesting quote, like a positive quote, out of a bad review.
Yeah.
And use that.
Yeah.
I think, wait a minute. Even when they get to a level of even we both do YouTube, but if they use one of our quotes, I thought that's a bit low. That's a bit. Use something from the press, So I thought his finishing move was a bit rubbish. He just punched him in the gut and just kind of went like crappy, sort of artificially slowed down. I think he should have done what Van Damme does, is done the weird helicopter kick as the finishing move. But then again, that could have been like, oh, he's copying Van Damme. So yeah, could have done something better. It could have just punched his hand through his chest.
It needs to be the most elaborate move of the fight, the last move.
Yeah,
I think.
Exactly. The finishing blow. And also to show us a full gore or something like that, or just kick his head off or something.
Ricky owe it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, add some cool optical lightning out of his comes out of his foot, knocks his head off, and it flies out the window, goes into space. That'd be good.
like Hercules with the Lou Ferrigno and the bear.
The cannon one. He throws the bear. That is hard. That film is so much fun. Such a good film.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Sybil Danning as well, man. Any movie with Sybil Danning in it's worth seeing.
Yeah. Also, like Gary Daniels said, you never see his POV of who he's fighting, and there's only one shot in the film as a POV is this part here, where he looks down, he's ready to fight him, and he sort of sees all the bad guys on the stairs, and they kneel down to him. And he said that should have been more of that, so who he's going to fight him. Because when you see the fight scenes, you just see dudes coming in on frame.
Yeah.
Just to deck in. Think, well, you don't even know the numbers.
That's a really good point. There's something about the cinematography in the fight scenes, with it being too close up and so as we've talked about, that just doesn't work for me, and I think that might be key to it. Yeah,
it's like a line of people off camera. It's like, next person, next person comes in, knocks them out. Does he kiss her? Oh, I can't remember.
I think so, because I think I remember going, ugh.
He hasn't seen her for the entire film. Just had flashbacks. Come on, do something.
Normally, an actor who can't act and therefore is given very little dialogue, they can normally at least like handle a camera being pointed at them for an expression, can't they? He can't act not acting.
That's good. That's a good shot. The final shot at the end, when they're all kneeling down, you sort of pans, you see the sort of big statue.
They're getting value out of that location as well.
It's a really good location, though. It's got that kind of like sort of French kind of design, like Alien Resurrection. The sort of a lot of kind of murky, sort of pissy yellows and like and oranges.
It's a very masculine look somehow.
Yeah.
That's how Ron Burgundy would decorate his apartment, I imagine.
There we go, we've got the main theme again. So yeah, I mean, final thoughts on Fist of the North Star. I mean, it's actually, we kind of spent a lot of time not talking about the film, talking about other stuff, because it kind of like, once you've kind of explored some of the elements of it, I mean, it doesn't really have enough story there to sustain its kind of runtime, even though they had to pad it out to extend its runtime to make it more sort of theatrical length. But it's there's so much more they've left on a cutting room floor, or left out from the anime or the comic books.
Yeah,
sort of really give it a little bit more sort of more weight to its story, and the love story doesn't work. And that's what Tony Randall had put the whole thing on, this romance.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not really executed very well.
Or what he keeps calling, or kept calling, the love triangle as well. And it isn't a love triangle. It's a love triangle slightly different. But yeah, that's it. I think maybe his approach was, well, we need a stronger story. I'm not just going to make a martial arts movie. And the payoff there, or the balance there, was losing a lot of the martial arts, and unfortunately the story he did add wasn't really any good. You do kind of end up with a bit of it hasn't got an awful lot going for it, apart from the aesthetic. It's that mid-90s martial arts movie shot on 35mm film, people in it who really know what they're doing, and that's where the value lies to me. That's why I enjoy it, even though it isn't a good movie, and it isn't a good bad movie either. Really, it's not a laugh constantly at how hilariously silly it is.
That is true. Yeah, I agree with that. Because it's like, as you're saying, it's got good elements too. I like the miniatures and the score, and some of the fight scenes are kind of okay. Like when you get to the end, you think, okay, this is what it should have been throughout the entire film. And Gary Daniels, I love him as a martial artist, but he's not leading man material at this point as an actor. I don't know if he's acting as probably would naturally got better over time, but still, like, for the lot of emoting he would have to do in the film, he doesn't really pull it off. This looks a lot of time. This looks a bit confused or a bit lost. Yeah. On camera, it's like first take, staring at the camera. It's like, okay, right, is that it? Yeah, it's not a good bad movie. Yeah, it wouldn't be. Yeah, as you say, it wouldn't be lumped into that. It's just kind of a very so-so film that has a few interesting elements, but doesn't deliver on the genre, what it's trying to be.
Yeah, its qualities are probably not what was intended at the time. For me, anyway, what I enjoy about this is the fact that it is shot on film. It looks like it was shot on film. Everyone's done all the things they used to do even in cheap B movies in terms of set decoration and makeup and all of those things. So it looks nothing like a cheap movie made today. Nothing like a cheap B movie of 2022.
Oh, no. And it looks like a film.
Yeah, and I'll watch anything in that remit. I'll watch absolutely anything, and this is much better than a lot of the stuff that I would watch quite happily.
Well, obviously, the sign of a somewhat B movie is that they couldn't afford Dolby Stereo. It's in Ultra Stereo.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, another sign. There's a cheaper version of Dolby Surround, essentially. So, but yeah, it's for fans. It's complete. They write it off. Don't talk about it anymore. It's one of those, forget about it.
But there will be people out there who saw this when they were 12 or whatever. It was their introduction to either martial arts or kickboxing or anime or Gary Daniels even, and
so there's definitely nostalgia there. For sure. But it's like, I suppose I maybe came into it a little bit too late. If I saw it when I was very young, I would have gone, oh, that's a fucking great film. And then you can kind of appreciate for all that sort of nostalgic sort of connection. But when you sort of see it as in an older age and sort of with perspective and a somewhat maybe a fresh pair of eyes, you think, oh god, that's a bit of a massive misfire, creatively. It's like, yeah, you've got the wrong director. Should have just gone. It was so easy just to say we're going to shoot this in the desert, in California, get an action director in, and you would have a fucking great movie. And it didn't really have to be about the gore and things like that. It's more about, as long as you can provide some cool action. And if you saw some buildings being cut in half, that would be like, whoa, that would have blown you away.
Yeah, they could have lost the gore without suffering, as long as they didn't lose everything else as well. And it's just generic, isn't it? It's got nothing really to do with the source material.
No. I mean, it's just like Mortal Kombat. They didn't have all the fatalities in the film, but what they did give you was good fight scenes, and that sort of made up for that lack of fatalities.
Very true.
Made it successful. So there you go. Well, folks, that is the end of the commentary. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, me and Rob will be back soon with some more commentaries. Hopefully, with maybe something sort of horror related, because Halloween's coming up soon.
Oh, absolutely. So. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be some Halloween sort of horror sort of schlock we can do that will fit, or maybe some sort of interesting kind of sequels to some of the big franchises. Perhaps that's where they get a bit rubbish.
Yeah. There are plenty of. Howling 2 is just waiting to be watched.
Oh my god, is that Red Brown in there?
Yes.
Oh my god, the real Captain America.
Red Brown and Christopher Lee together at last.
Oh my god, everyone wanted that, didn't they? Everyone's wish list. All right, okay, folks, take care of yourselves and goodbye.
Cheers, goodbye.